Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kelsey and let's go over my best books of 2025. I'm so excited for this video because although I would describe last year as being a pretty mid reading year, I definitely had a lot of wins. So before we begin, I have two honorable mentions that will then lead into my 7 best books of the year. Could I have given you 10? Potentially, but I just feel like you'll understand why these are honorable mentions, and then I just couldn't come up with like a 10th one. So we're just gonna go with the way I've structured this list. Starting with my first honorable mention of the year, which is Slow Down, Enjoy Life by my best friend, Stephanie Zito. Yes, there is a bias, but this is just a guide to practical, simple self-care. And it's filled with like a lot of my friends' like drawings and working to help readers go on like a self-healing journey. It's quite short. I think if you need something like this in your life, obviously I'm biased, but I would highly recommend. And I think that if you're also just starting on a like self-care mental health journey, I think this is a great place to start. I'm not saying that from a biased point of view. I'm saying that because I actually read the book and I actually feel this way. And so I couldn't make a best books of the year without supporting one of the best books to come into my hands this year. And then the final honorable mention is actually a group of 4 books, which is my Hunger Games reread. As you can see, I did quite a number on them this year. I just think The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins is an excellent young adult series that focuses on the disruption of the people in power who are using the death of poorer children as entertainment. I think Suzanne Collins really was doing something here with this book. I think The Hunger Games, unfortunately, as for right now and in the near future, will always be relevant. In The Hunger Games, we are following a young 16-year-old girl named Katniss Everdeen, who on the morning of the reaping, when her younger sister is chosen to enter the Hunger Games, she volunteers as a tribute, and the series follows her as she enters and re-enters the Hunger Games and the fall of the government because of it. I loved these. I gave them all pretty much 5 stars except for The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I used to give 2 stars. I really didn't understand the purpose of it, and I think with the rise of what is going on in the neighbors southern towards me, this gave me a like fresh new perspective on a person going into power who is extremely insecure. And I think what Suzanne Collins was saying in here about evil, about the rise to power, was really, really prevalent to these times and interesting. So that's why I bumped it up completely. And I have a feeling that if I would reread it again post whatever the hell is happening in the world, I could possibly give it a 5 stars as well. And I do want to take the time right here to say that people who don't like Mockingjay are wrong. I'm sorry. This is still a 5-star book for me, but I think, honestly, I feel like this is my favorite in the series. It was just so poignantly political, discussing the fall, PTSD, what happens when people are pushed into moments of war and annihilation of groups of their friends, of the reality that they are currently living in. I just loved it. I loved every single one, but I think if I had to pick one, Mockingjay is my favorite. But my love for this series, I reread it leading up to the release of the 7th book on my best books of the year list, which is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This follows the 50th Hunger Games and specifically Haymitch's games. So Haymitch is the mentor to Katniss and Peeta in the first Hunger Games trilogy, and this follows his games, what happened, what we are meant to understand from his games, because we do learn a little bit about them in the Hunger Games series, but this is really going into what exactly we either know or are missing from his experience in the games. I read this in, I think, like 2 sittings. I could not put this down. I was so captivated, especially you would think because we already know what's going on and we already know that Haymitch is the winner because he is the only mentor of District 12 for Katniss and Peeta to rely on. So you would think this would be boring or repetitive because where are the stakes when we already know what's supposed to happen? But I felt so empty at the end of reading this because I do think that despite knowing where this was going and having a feeling about where this was going, emotionally, it still took a toll on me. I feel like I need to reread this again, especially in the wake of what is happening, maybe before the release of the movie as well. I feel like this was a book also for people who did not understand what the Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes was about. Like me, I feel like here she's really trying to hone in on exactly what she is talking about, the the criticism that she has on the current political climate of the world. She did not want to be subtle at all. She needed to be extremely obvious. So I could see how that could be a critique of this book, but I really, really adored it because I really think she's highlighting the levels at which a government goes to hide things from their population and or change the narrative of what is going on. Suzanne Collins wanted to say, you guys are consuming propaganda every single day and you need to realize that. And for that, I say, thank you, Miss Collins. I will never, ever, ever doubt you again. Love this. 5 stars. And if you have not read the Hunger Games series, I really highly recommend. They are YA books, but I don't think Suzanne Collins ever dumbs down her books for her audience, for the teens that could potentially be reading this, but also the adults reading it as well. Highly recommend. Fantastic. Love this series. I'm a huge Hunger Games fan. I hate when I read a 5-star book during the year and I'm so flabbergasted by the book. My reviews are like 1 to 2 words. And for this one specifically, I wrote literally no notes, but that's not helpful for me right now to summarize exactly what I loved about Empire of Wild by Sherry Demaline, but I will do my best. Empire of Wild follows this Metsi woman named Joan who is drawn to this tent in a Walmart parking lot as people are listening to a charismatic preacher. When she gets there, she realizes that this preacher is her lost husband, Victor. However, the man is insistent that he is not Victor. He is just here to bring the Metsi people to Jesus. And as Joan moves to confront him, speak to him about it, she realizes that this man truly believes that he is not Victor. And so Joan sets out to remind the Reverend who he really is. This is inspired by the Metsi story of the Rougarou, who is a werewolf-like creature that haunts the Metsi communities. So with that, you can sort of gather where this book is really going. I am a huge, huge, huge fan of Sherry Demaline. One of her first books, The Marrow Thieves, is still, I think to this day, one of my favorite books. I love the way Sherry Demaline reimagines Metsi stories and Indigenous stories and transforms them into these really, really, really meaningful pieces. She does a really excellent job at making you care about your main characters while also being incredibly frightened by the evilness that is surrounding the book. There's always this incorporation of religion, obviously, as the Indigenous people of Canada specifically were taken over and forced to succumb to Christianity, Catholicism, particularly with residential schools where the taking of Indigenous children from their communities happened until 1996. The last residential school closed in 1996. So I was 3 when the last school closed, if that puts you into the mind of how Catholicism was so incredibly entrenched into these communities as it extended for such a long period of time. So there's this critique of Christianity and how it infiltrates these communities while also taking in this Indigenous story and showing how that infiltrates the Metsi communities. I just absolutely love Sherry Demaline. I don't think Empire of the Wild was any different. Loved this book. I do think it's a really great entry point for Sherry Demaline because it is a standalone novel, but I would recommend anything she's ever written because I do think she has a finger on the pulse on what is addictive while also tackling really important subjects within her novels. The 5th book on this list is one that I knew was just going to be a part of the list, and that is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. As soon as I heard the prompt for this book, which is that it followed women in space and tackling LGBTQ ideas, I was like, this shit's going to be for me. I know it. The book mainly follows an astronaut named Jo Goodwin, who has been obsessed with the stars ever since she can remember. Selected from a pool of thousands of applicants in the summer of 1980, Joan begins to train at the Houston Space Center and meets the new astronauts that will be with her and a part of her crew. Then on a mission in December 1984, it all changes in an instant. I think Taylor Jenkins Reid really has the talent to make people cry at the end of her books. I really, really love the overall reading experience. I love following women in historical settings who are doing things that are against what they are supposed to be doing during this time. I finished the book sobbing because there's so much to this book that adds to this tension that really accumulates at the end. You could tell that this was really a labor of love for TJR, and you could really feel the amount of care and research that she put into this to make her characters feel realistic for readers. Her writing, as with all of her books, is so easy to get into, and I think that helps with making the reading experience feel like I'm flying through the book. It kept me really engaged from the start, and I think particularly that is because she made such a strong character of Joan, and I never wanted to put the book down because I was just so captivated by Joan becoming the character who she is at the end. The discussions that were going on throughout the book about having the courage to reach for the stars was, I think, lame for me, a person who struggles with vulnerability, but I did in fact cry because I think it is a really important message, especially for someone like me who does struggle with believing in oneself, with wanting to achieve big dreams. So I think that this novel came to me probably at a really perfect time. It was towards the end of my maternity leave around November, I think I read it. So I think I just really, really, really needed to hear this. But also TJR is a fantastic writer. As we've seen, many of her books are hits. So if you haven't read this one, I really would encourage you to pick it up. Then I could not make a best books of the year without talking about a book that, not really a book, a lifestyle, an experience that has truly taken over my life for the last 2 months. And this was one of the last books I read in the year of 2025, and it shot its way to the top. And that is Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed. I'm wearing an Ilya Rozanov shirt. I just... listen. So this book follows Shane Hollander and Ilya Rozanov as they are the two best hockey players in the league and how they play each other in this intense rivalry, as they've both been the best hockey players since they've joined the league, and the equally intense romance that they have behind the scenes. I don't think you could have been alive in December of 2025 and not heard about Heated Rivalry. If it did not consume you, how? How did it not consume you? Because I am trying to escape from this prison. I'm Canadian, I'm bisexual, I played hockey my entire life. Obviously, I was going to love this. I think this was exactly what I needed at the end of the year. Like I said, I was coming to the end of my maternity leave. I was really struggling with the idea of going back to work, going back to a life previous to what is a very life-changing event that happened to me. I was trying to come to terms with understanding that I had to go back to work. And part of that was understanding that I have difficulty, like I said, being vulnerable. I think you see a theme with some of the books that we have on this list. And Ilya Rozanov, I think, while some people might think it's quite silly, is a character that really, really, really means a lot to me. I am someone who struggles a lot with being vulnerable, with expressing my feelings. I often express my feelings in ways that seem silly or frivolous in order to not appear weak and whatnot. Hearing Ilya Rozanov talk about these things and the way that he acted throughout the book and also the series spoke to me in a way that I don't think I particularly saw with a lot of characters this year. I loved how just sweet and simple this story was. I think this is probably one of my favorite romances of all time. I think that's simply because these are two characters that are struggling with things internally in a society or small aspect of society that works to make everyone the same. Look, I've played hockey. I know how it is. I know sport teammate dynamics. And I just think that this worked really well to make light of perhaps these concepts and the fact that they have this rivalry and that they need to keep their romance contained and push each other away. But it also tackled some things that I think are really important, especially for people who find themselves lacking in the vulnerability department. I hope that made sense. It really is a fun book overall. I don't think it's tackling things as intensely for a lot of people who don't identify so heartedly with Ilya, but because I do, I think that this really, really, really made me ready for a new adventure in my life. And I think it came to me at just the perfect time. The third book on this list, I feel like I've been talking about it so much because I did read it in October. And so since then, I think it was on my quarterly wrap up, that video, and now I'm talking about it again. And that is You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. In this book, there is this mass of worms and insects that has come together in the dark corners of the Appalachia, and it is demanding for unwavering loyalty from humans and fresh corpses from dead humans. And in order to get that, the hives offer a few struggling humans exactly what they need. One of those humans is our main character named Crane. As he works to help the hive, Crane is given the opportunity to transition finally, which is what he wanted his entire life. Through a sexual relationship with one of his coworkers named Levi, Crane gets pregnant and the hive demands for the child to be born. I think this is where I want to give a warning that this is probably one of the more graphic and gory books I've ever read. The language that White is using in this book to talk about gender dysphoria and self-hatred and the process of birth was extremely explicit. But I do think it works really, really well to truly express how our main character is feeling and how it will make the reader feel really uncomfortable. I do think that some may find these descriptions to be unnecessary, but I actually do think that they were really important at working out how Crane views himself as a person. The relationship in the book between parasitic aliens and pregnancy worked really well, as I often joked about having a parasite inside me, and how I think a lot of people who carry babies can't express this sentiment. It can be just as horrific and gross and dysphoric sometimes. And so I think White's language in here is really honing in on these grapples with how we experience our bodies in ways that we are uncomfortable with. Additionally, I really liked the subtle commentary on the aliens themselves and how they are practically useless and can't really carry out anything by themselves. They need humans to do the things that they want them to do. And they manipulate these humans in order to achieve their overarching goals. In the end, they aren't really the true horror of the novel because it's not them committing these acts. The horror of the novel is actually our own main character, his anxiety and his dread over what he is doing to others and how they are doing it back to him and how he's losing control of his own body due to an overarching nemesis governmental control. I really don't think this is for everyone, but if you fuck with it, I think it works really well. I absolutely adored this. And now time for the penultimate book of the list, which is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. This is M.L. Wong's second book, and I loved this one. It follows this young girl named Siona who has devoted every waking moment of the past 20 years to study magic. She wants to pretty much achieve the impossible, which is to be the first woman accepted into the High Magistry. And when she finally joins, she discovers that this is where the challenges in her life will begin. Making it to number 2 on the list just proves that this is obviously one of the best books I've read all year, but I definitely think one of the best books I've read in recent times. I knew from the first chapter I was going to love this, and I was so happy that it was living up to my expectations. M.L. Wong creates such vivid characters. Both our main characters had motivations and flaws, especially Siona, who was so annoying in the beginning. It made them just feel so real to me. I went to this knowing absolutely nothing besides the fact that Siona is a female mage trying to join the High Magistry, which is a field dominated by men, and Tommel, who is the assistant that she is assigned, is below them in regards to like class within the system. I was so thrilled at how these dynamics unraveled and unfolded throughout the book, which is why I don't want to give too much in regards to a synopsis. And I honestly can't believe that this was a standalone and it felt so contained and it felt so resolved. I loved it. Her power, I feel, is truly unmatched. Much like with The Sword of Kaigen, which is M.L. Wong's first novel, Wong really masters these discussions on sexism and colonialism, with this novel also adding on this look at classism and how it ties specifically into the aspects of academia and opportunities / power within these fields. Honestly, no notes once again, absolutely perfect. Love this. Highly recommend. And now the last book on this list, but my favorite book of the year, one I read in January and I have not stopped thinking about, The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I loved this. So this follows a world where every city has a soul, and New York in particular has 5, and how these 5 people come together to work to destroy the dark side that comes with also being a city. It's really hard to explain because you have to just sort of understand that these 5 main characters are just the epitome of the different boroughs that they're following, and they work sort of as these like heroes of the specific boroughs. And if you can understand that, you can kind of get behind what the hell is going on in here. In general, I think N.K. Jemisin is a fantastic writer. Everything that I've ever read from them, I've pretty much enjoyed. And I was worried with that weird premise that The City We Became was going to just be one of those books that would fall through the cracks, but I loved what the hell was going on in her brain with this one. The writing, obviously fantastic. N.K. Jemisin is a fantastic writer. The character dynamics in here were really funny because the characters themselves were caricatures of the different neighborhoods. And I found that to be really poignant, jovial, but at the same time, a conversation as to what's going on in those neighborhoods. I think a lot of the commentary on here is really on the nose. So if you don't like that, I don't know if you'll like this that much, but I love that N.K. Jemisin was just tackling class discussions, once again, a common theme, discussing racism, discussing privilege in specific cities, discussing how neighborhoods are taken over by the privileged class. Just all of it was fantastic. On top of the fact that this was just fun. N.K. Jemisin, you can tell, had fun with this book. There's jokes, there's like little nods at what's going on in New York City. There's things that are outright silly that go on in this book. I just loved it so much. I have not stopped thinking about it since January. It is one complete year. I have a video planned for February where I'm going to read the sequel of this book just because I literally cannot stop thinking about it. I just loved what N.K. Jemisin did with this. I thought it was different. I thought it was funky. I thought it was fresh. Highly, highly recommend. If you've never read N.K. Jemisin, I think this is an easy place to start. And if you've read from her before, I think this is just pure fun enjoyment. If you're looking for like a little bit of critique on society while also having an extremely engaging romp, I would highly recommend. And so those were my best books of 2025. If you've read any of them, please let me know down below what you thought about them. Did you like them? Did you hate them? Do you have a different feeling than I do? Let me know down below. If you would like to follow me on any of my other social medias, I do leave a link down below to my Twitter, Goodreads, and Instagram if you would like to follow me there. Of course, as we know, social medias are a part of capitalism, all owned by oligarchs. So if they still exist, you can follow me there. And of course, because it is the end of the video, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. It does wonders for my channel, makes me feel really good. And that's it. I will see you again next week with my 2026 goals and anticipated releases. But for now, I don't know how to end these things, so I will see you next time. Okay, bye!